Welcome back. It's still Business Morning here on Channels Television. Now, in the light of ongoing discussions about Nigeria's economic trajectory and the role of international partners, we know that President Trump hasn't been very friendly with financial support or aid generally, especially to the emerging economies. But we see the UK Development Finance Institution steps in. They've been there, but they seem to want to expand their sustenance of their space, their work spanning from agriculture, energy transition, digital infrastructure, financial inclusion, and all of that. So here we have here in the studio the head of office and coverage director for Nigeria at British International Investment. That was the BII I talked about, Mr. Benson Adenuga. That's right here in the studio to tell us why the renewal of interest. But I know, I mean, BII has been here and you've been supporting a lot of businesses, at least that I know of. You're welcome to the program first.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
Good morning.
Yeah. So your cousin, the US, they've decided to look inwards. It's more protectionism at this time, and so they've got a lot of aids, but it seems like the UK wants to step in and fill in some of those shoes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wouldn't say stepping in to fill some of the shoes. I think it's just to say that we have been active in Nigeria for over 70 years, and that commitment actually has remained consistent. And that is because when you look at Nigeria, it's the largest country in terms of population in Africa. And it's a country that has so much potential. And as a DFI who is focused on Africa, you cannot ignore Nigeria. So we have been working in Nigeria and we can support the country. Since I joined, every single year, we have continued to invest in the country, and even now, we remain very keen to continue to invest in Nigeria. I'm sure you've been following the news, and you have been seeing the new investment we've been announcing, all of last year, even this year as well. So we'll remain consistent and continue to support Nigeria.
So we know, at least I know, that you're very much interested in agriculture, and there's a weak link in the agriculture sector in Nigeria, mostly the post-harvest losses. I think that is why you have invested. I know a couple of companies you've been working with to have warehouses and all of that. And I'd like for you to assess if you're happy with the results of your investment, at least in that area so far.
I think we're still scratching the surface. And I say that because if you look at the entire agricultural value chain, starting from the farm production itself, you see that the small-scale farmers are responsible for the largest production in our country. And they are sort of that market segment that continue to struggle to access finance and support. You then go from there to actually the issue of post-harvest losses. It's still very significant. In some estimates, put the figure at about 40%, which means that at the current level of production, we can have 40% more food in our country. That is massive. And that's the reason why we're doing two things along those lines. The first one is supporting companies that actually process agricultural commodities. Because when you process, you minimize the losses. That's the reason why, if you look at our recent announcement on John Vance, which is really a company in Ondo State that processes cocoa into cocoa butter, cocoa liquor, cocoa wine. I mean, we supported them with a $40 million long-term financing. It's because we want to reduce not just post-harvest losses, also generate foreign exchange earnings because they export majority of their production. We also invested in Valencia International. They are active in cashew production. They are active in soya beans as well. They also process, and essentially they export most of it as well. So for us, the whole area of post-harvest losses, providing storage infrastructure, supporting companies that buy directly from farmers and link them with multinational companies and distribution companies is a very important area for us. So for us, the entire value chain is what we're looking to support, which is why we've made investments that we have announced recently. And for us, this particular, finagri space is an area where we will continue to support because it's so critical to our economy.
But what do you look out for to step into a business? What qualifies a business to get, a British international intervention?
Well, I think the starting point is there has to be a company within a focus strategy area, the key sector of interest for us. So you look at it, we are active in infrastructure, in financial services, in food and agriculture, manufacturing, in healthcare as well, in digital. So when you look at this, so first of all, the business needs to be in that particular space. Then secondly, it needs to be a business that sort of has proven business model. At the end of the day, we don't want to support businesses that are going to fumble and then tomorrow they are no longer there. So we need businesses that have got very sustainable business models. And of course, the partner that we're working with need to share our value system. And also the willingness to commit to the high standards in terms of the environmental, social, and governance principle that we want to work with. That is what we look out for. And once we see that, we work with the partner, we look how we can grow the business and take it from the level it is now to a significantly bigger level in the future. That's what we're looking for.
Doesn't that leave out the small businesses?
Actually, it doesn't, because we recognize the role that early stage businesses, small businesses play, which is the reason why we are one of the most active investors in venture capital today. So when you look at Nigeria today, most of the venture capital companies we have invested in that. What do? They basically support innovation. They support early stage businesses. So in Nigeria today, you talk about a company like Ventures Platform. It's one of the leading VC companies in Nigeria. We invest in them. TLCom, Novastar, Noskin 22. So we know that the early stage businesses, small businesses are critical, but you need people who have the skills and the experience to support them. That's the reason why we approach that particular segment by working with venture capital companies.
And you're also gender sensitive, I guess.
Very much so, very much. That's because, as you know, women represent more than half of our population. And various studies have shown that in terms of contributing to the economy, in terms of productivity, they are very, very, active. However, women continue to suffer from access to finance and the support they need to grow their businesses. That's the reason why, I don't know if you've seen, just last week, we announced a $5 million investment in Arua Capital. So this is really a woman-owned and led investment company focusing specifically on companies that provide goods and services to women. So we're very excited about this because they have a track record and they are looking to expand their activities. So for such businesses, we're excited to support them and ensure that they have the funding and support they need to be able to do that. In addition to that, not too long ago, we provided $100 million to First Bank of Nigeria for on-lending to the SME space. And out of that $100 million, we specifically earmarked 30% actually for women-owned and led businesses. So for us in BII, supporting women-owned and led businesses and supporting the women, population is a key focus area. And we don't just say it, we also practice it.
What do you get out of all of this as BII?
I think for us, look, we're established.
Because that's a lot of fund.
It's a lot of fund. And just as you know, we are owned by the UK government. We are the DFI of the UK.
And the UK
government.
needs funding too.
They do.
We hear news from back home.
Definitely they do. Every country needs funding, as you know. But I think the reality is that the UK recognizes that they need to play their own part in supporting development in Africa, in Southeast Asia. And that's the reason why we continue to receive funding for us to support the growth private sector, in this emerging market. And in Africa, as I mentioned before, Nigeria is such a key focus area for us. And that is what the UK is looking for, supporting developments in our markets.
And BII is happy with the reforms in the country. I mean, average Nigerians will say, oh, God, the Tinubu administration with all of the reforms hasn't been easy. But it does seem that BII is comfortable with it.
I think the first point to say is that BII is a counter-cyclical investor. Even when things are challenging, we continue to look for the ways to invest. But back to the reforms, I would say yes. Some of these reforms, as many people have highlighted, are reforms that are critical for our economy. We've been investing there for a long time. I remember a time, not just recent past, when there were about 5 or 6 different exchange rates. You bring money as a foreign investor, you change the money at a particular rate. When you exit the investment, you start wondering what rates do you exit or do you use to sort of take your money out of the country? When you are counting the interim period, it's very challenging. And we saw that, and because of all of that, we saw how liquidity in foreign exchange was a major problem. Now that that sector has been reformed, that's no longer an issue. You've got one official rate, which is really fantastic. In addition to that, you look at the whole issue of subsidy and what that does, for the fiscal deficit in our country. It was a major drag. So I would say that while there are consequences in the near term, in the current, of all of this reform, there are reforms that need to be done to ensure Nigeria is placed on a pedestal that supports growth in the future. So while there are challenges, unfortunately, I don't think we have any way around this reform. I think we need to do them. Of course, we need to think about how we sort of limit the impact on the most vulnerable in our society. But these are reforms that Nigeria definitely needs to do.
All right, thank you so much for that, Mr. Benson Adenuga, the Head of Office and Coverage Director for Nigeria at the British International Investment.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.